today we're going to talk about a bike that I came across last year. I was doing a thing called a charity ride called the Ride of the Ruperts, and I came across this green bike, and it was going fairly quickly. And the guy behind the bike, the most important guy, is Bo. Bo Nielsen. It was really nice to meet you last year, and we had a bit of a chat about your bike, because this is your concept on a sand racing bike, isn't it? Something
Yes.
You've taken and you've done your own thing on it. So really, I wanted you to talk about what you've done to this bike and why you've done it.
Okay. Basically, when I bought the bike, it was quite bad state. The original mud guards was rusted both ends and things. So I decided to make it into kind of a bobber and tune the engine a little bit and have a little bit of fun.
Before we go too far, so the history of these bikes, people that don't know, they originated probably in what, 1930s?
Now, 1934 was the first one that came out on the market, and they then used the more or less unchanged bike from 37 into 48, 49, and then they made a change where the front forks go for a low setup to a high setup, and they continued selling them up to a late 50s.
But these are a Danish-built bike.
The Danish-built
for people
bike.
that don't know. And whatever you want for these bikes, you can still find.
Yes.
And new parts are made now as well. And the engine on these, what is quite interesting, its roots are very similar to an Austin A7, I believe.
Yes, very similar. Internally, they're very similar. The difference is basically, of course, this one has got overhead cams and top valves instead of the setup down there, Austin 7.
But it's a bike that could be fitted with a sidecar. It would also possibly have a pillion seat, but I know we had a conversation earlier. You bought this as your work bike, and if you had a pillion on the back, it was a higher tax
Yes, more tax
increase on it. So, yeah, but if you had a sidecar, you could have it with any platform you wanted, because a lot of tradespeople would use it.
It was basically, when they were sold, it was mostly for tradespeople. So they had all kind of boxes, different setups, so they could transport materials and tools and everything. It was basically kind of those years, it was basically what we know as a Ford Transit today.
And it was used for through the war as
Yes.
well. Come back to where we were on it. So you picked this up in quite a dilapidated state, and you decided to build something that you could actually do competitive sport with.
Yes.
So how did you get into this sand racing thing? What inspired you to do this?
Just because I had the old bikes, I had a few of them, and I wanted to do something competitive because I like building the engines, I like the mechanics and tuning and everything. That's kind of where I come from. So and they're quite easy and simple. Anybody can build them in a day, basically. The engines, it's so simple. So it's easy to tune them if you know what you
I suppose what stands out about these is the fact it's shaft drive. There's no chain to worry about, no exposure to the sand like a chain would have. What we were chatting about is the engine is very much like an Austin. So we have external valves, but that's not an issue with sand, because you were saying that you run these dry. If in a competition, you would spray everything off with brake cleaner, so sand can't stick to any oil.
That's right.
Normally on the road, you'd probably put just a little bit of oil sometimes.
Just a little drop of oil once in a while.
Another big feature, I'm going to let you talk about it more, is they're very good at running at low speed and not heating up.
Yeah.
So that's quite something.
Because they've got an enormous aluminium sump with the fins on, but they only actually take 2 liters of oil. So whole sump works like a big oil cooler. So the people that have tested them and everything, the oil hardly ever come over 65 degrees.
We're going to walk around the bike now. I want you to talk about literally the bike as it is, and tell us about like what we've been saying just now. Just carry on from that. So what people will find interesting is we've got a big sump capacity we've just been talking about, which will keep the engine fairly cool because of the amount of oil in there. but we have a sharp bevel drive, which runs up from the crankcase and runs up to what is a
The overhead cam,
overhead cam, but also
the old ignition is sitting up
assembly.
there.
If you
Yes.
you want to sort of
So,
take us through it,
so you've got the cam, of course, that take all the valves, and you've got all the points sitting in here. You've got the distributor, but the distributor is also the coil built in, so you don't have a separate coil anywhere on the bike. So basically, the only electric you need for running the bike is power to the coil, and the 2 wires down to the alternator.
so the biggest thing that I've noticed straight away is the simplicity of the bike. It's laid out, nothing's complicated, and everything functions simply. We were talking earlier about the cables. Now the cables are so easy. I mean, the activation you can show us in a moment, but I know replacement of cable. You haven't got to take a tank off. You can unclip a cable and change it within minutes. So how this throttle, for instance, just show us how that works.
Yes, basically it's just a little hook that come back down, and it just pulls the cables.
I mean, it can't get more simple.
Can't
than
get any
that,
more
can
simple,
it?
and you can just unhook it. Normally, when you've got one cable, unhook it and take it off, and you can take the carburetor off straight away.
While we're talking about the handlebars, so our controls are very much conventional.
Yeah.
Front brake,
Throttle,
obviously.
front brake, clutch, and this is unconventional. This is actually light on and high and low beam on the handle.
This your idea, or this is their
This is
concept?
the design. That is all Nimbuses have got that design. So there are no light switches or anything anywhere. So it's all built into one unit from the factory.
So we have a horn here,
Yeah.
this ignition key,
Yeah.
and the damper.
Yeah.
It's so clean lines.
Yeah.
It's very, very clean, isn't it?
And also very easy for wiring, because all the wiring just go to one box that's sitting underneath here.
But this bike isn't standard because it's had your take on it.
Yeah.
So we were chatting before, the Rider Ruperts, you got twin carbs on here.
Yeah.
So this is something that you decided to do yourself.
Yeah.
So instead of having a manifold, we normally have a central carburetor, you've now converted
Yeah, so
this.
we have basically blocked the standard holes for the carburetor and made 2 new with flanges and everything, so we can get a twin carburetor, so we can feed it more, because we are revving it much higher when we race it.
But the thing about this, the frame itself, isn't a tubular frame. This is all flat steel, but it's very strong. And talking to you just now, we were talking about the way it's put together. A lot of this is all welded. It's not welded.
There are
it's
no
riveted.
welds, it's all riveted.
So any damage, you could actually grind the rivet off, punch it out, and replace a section
Yes,
of the frame.
yes, we say replace a section.
And we've got the gearbox here, because the car clutch, similar to a car clutch, is
Yes,
inside
basically
here.
dry clutch, like a car, and a 3-speed conventional gearbox, 1 down, 2 up.
And the Kickstarter
Yeah.
is like with the early BMWs,
yeah,
isn't it?
Same as
to
on BMW.
So you kick it down this
Yeah.
way instead of that way.
It'll easily cruise at 70 miles an hour.
That's quite incredible.
What other modifications, Bo? What else?
I mean, modifications is basically the mud guards and things have been changed around. Lights is different, and then all the changes are made to the engine to, of course, for competition, get more power out of it. That's really the changes, but the frame is the same, tank is the same, the electrics is more or less the standard setup, and then of course I've got some different tyres to be able to drive in the sand.
You can't tell us the mods, can you?
No. And of course you've got a 4-in-1 exhaust system that gave a much better flow. I mean, without that, then you couldn't get any more power out of it, because the standard manifold is so restrictive.
We're going to talk about the standard model in a moment, but there's 2 versions of forks here, aren't there?
Yes.
These are called the long forks.
So these forks are long forks for this year, because that's what people did. This is a later model fork that was people upgraded to because everybody believed they were better at the time. So this is a 1947 bike with the high forks, and the one behind us is also a 1947 bike, but that's original as the forks should be.
So when we mentioned about the forks, we're looking at the fork leg.
Yeah, and how high they are above the tank.
Yeah. But these were quite a well-used bike in the military as well, weren't they? Because they were very
in Denmark,
reliable.
The post office had them, the police had them, and the military had them. And the last military bike was, I believe, they got sold it off up in the 70s.
Were they a bike that really only stayed in like Denmark? It wasn't an exported model?
It was not really exported officially out, but through the years, there are members on the Facebook groups from Australia and Eastern Europe and America. There are 2 clubs in California, I believe, and they spread all over because people really like them. And there are also more and more of them in England.
Right, for people that don't know, Nimbus is a name obviously been around a long time in Denmark, but it didn't start off as Nimbus, did it, this bike? The incarnation was a little bit earlier.
The original Nimbus was in 2018, they came out with the original one, and that was called, or got the nickname, the Stovepipe. And the manufacturer, because they were manufacturers of electrical goods, they stopped production because they didn't have the capacity in the factory. And then in 1934, they came out with a new model. So that was the son of the founder of the company that basically came out with this design, and they started building this, and they built a new production facility for the bikes. And everything was made in-house, apart from things like the horn and the actual headlight.
Just go back to, so when it was a stovepipe, was it a 4-cylinder engine still?
It was a 4-cylinder engine, 750cc, exactly like the new ones, but it was with single cylinders.
Oh, right.
And of course, it didn't have an overhead camshaft and all those things, but in basis, the engine was the same. So same CCs and everything.
But the name fits the look, because you'd say stovepipe, so it had a different
so the
tank itself.
The frame, the top of the frame was basically a big diameter tube, and that was the fuel tank. And when people saw it, it came out on the market, of course, it looked like it was a stovepipe.
Yeah, yeah.
And the founder, he hated the nickname, but that stuck with it, and it's known as the Stovepipe.
Not many of these about now,
No.
I would imagine. No.
And they're mad pricing.
I've got to ask, so why have you chosen to be that interested in doing the Nimbus? I know it comes from where you come from, but what is it about the bike that appeals to you and really appeals to customers? The one thing that this bike can give you,
I think the simplicity, that's just very, very attractive. The shaft drive, so it removes lots of maintenance items, and every single thing you can see on the bike, you can buy from one of 5 dealers in Denmark.
you can still purchase now.
Yes, you can from the club in Denmark, you can buy a new engine block, you buy new cylinder heads. All the dealers have got all the wear parts as new production or old original parts. From the military stores.
These parts are quality.
The quality, everything fits. Everything fits because all the original technical drawings for all the parts is available from the club for anybody to buy.
We've got another bike over here, which I know is your pride and joy.
Yeah.
And this model here is slightly different. This is 1930,
Both these bikes are 1947.
1947. But this has the different forks. This has the
Yes,
low
that have
forks.
got the original low forks that should be on that bike.
Let's go over.
Yeah. So this is a 1947 sport model. So that was when originally the sport model came out with slightly higher pistons, so a little bit higher performance. They came out with the high sitting exhaust instead of having the original low. And they came out with the bottom of the tank was chrome, and it was chrome wheel rims. and the original Sport from before the war had a darker, really nice blue.
Yeah.
But after the war, this was the colour they came out in, and we believe it's because basically couldn't get the right colour.
But noticing the first thing that we notice, obviously here we have a really well balanced mudguard.
Yes.
So that's going to keep all the muck off you and keep it off the engine. This is one of your exhausts again, isn't it? Because it's unsilenced.
Yes, that's the muffler is basically taken out.
So the original one would have like a fishtail on the back.
Yes, and have a fishtail, a very specific fishtail for the Sport, and you'll normally have a muffler inside.
Your valve adjustment, tappet adjustment, it doesn't get any easier than that, does it?
No.
Feeler gauge, cut the spanners, well, screwdriver and a spanner.
And a lot of people ask why they aren't encapsulated, and the factory actually made kind of housings to encapsulate the valves and the springs, but it was not very successful because suddenly everything overheat.
Yeah.
So this setup is best for the cooling.
So Bo, this one you built
This is basically like it will come out of a factory.
with a low-level exhaust.
Low-level exhaust. It's the higher front. So this is a 50s, typical 50s bike with the saddle with the rubber suspension.
So we're not using springs here. We're just using these rubbers.
Yeah. So that was a change that happened in 1948 when they did go over to the high forks, and the change was basically high forks and the rubber sprung saddle. And the exhaust system on this is as it was from the original. That is the standard exhaust. They were all sitting like that, and that have got a fishtail on. They're produced sometimes in the 50s.
You have the fishtail. So the baffle is normally where in the pipe?
That's just stuffed in the pipe. So on this pipe here, you could put two baffles in if you wanted. So you could have a baffle lying down here, and you can have a baffle up here.
Okay, so it's a detachable pipe.
No, it's just a baffle you push inside.
Oh, I see. Right.
You just push inside. So you can have in this setup you can have two. In a sports setup you can only have one. And of course on the sports bike you probably wouldn't have any because the fishtail is enough.
But talking about some of the bikes have a rear saddle for a pillion.
Yeah.
And like the frame has already been pre-drilled for footrests. And
yeah.
So footrest fit.
So the footrest, all four footrests are the same design. So you basically have the two footrest, and you have got a rubber sprung saddle that go on the back if you want two people. But originally, lots of bikes came without the saddle because there was extra tax to have the saddle.
The lighting is voltage-wise now
6 volts.
It's 6 volts.
Yeah.
But that dynamo produces.
That produces 18 volt. So the only thing you need to change is the rectifier and the battery and the light bulbs, and you've got a 12 volt. And it's 70 watt dynamo, so you can ride with the light on all the time if you want.
Battery won't suffer at all.
No.
It will stay up the whole time,
Yeah.
and that's what we find with a lot of the old bikes is that the dynamo can't keep up with the output of the lights. So this never has a problem.
No.
And that we mentioned already, it stays cool, so you could be in traffic with this, filtering through traffic. It's not a problem with this.
Not a problem.
No. It's quite a machine, and I think it's one of those bikes, a bit like a Marmite. You either like it or you don't. And
That's right.
Love it.
I mean, there are some people. I've sold a few, and some people they absolutely love it, and others they kind of just can't get on with it.
Yeah.
Of course, it's you can suffer because it's a hardtail, and of course, if you're living somewhere where you've got really lots of potholes and uneven roads, then it can be a hard ride.
So we've got one of the engines. Must say first of all, it's upside down on the bench. This is a 37 engine. This will show. You can show us in a moment. This is the simplicity of this. It's just showing people exactly what's going on inside. So you've explained to people the build of this, the way it's put together. I can see it's over-engineered. It's literally built to last, and it's so simple. And some of the key things about it.
Yes, I mean, firstly, I mean the main thing of these engines is that it's a crank with two bearings, one in each end, and these big bearings. And on the end of it, you've got the bevel gear, and the bevel gear drives the dynamo that go up and drive the overhead cam, but it also drives the oil pump. And in the other end, you have got the dry cloth, exactly the same as on a car. Works the same way. It's very, very, very simple and works. Where all the bearings in the conrods, they're white metal, so you have to send them off to get new bearings made when you renovate an engine. But they have got that very easy to get done in Denmark. And I believe there are also people in England that do it because it's the same setup as an Ocean 7.
Why is white metal used?
That was basically the way they made bearings in those days. Old Rolls Royces and Bentleys and all old cars used the same.
Triumph Speed Twins, the 38, 39 models of those, they had white metal in the conrod itself.
I think it was most engines in old days before you used oil filters. They all used white metal.
Yeah. Something that's interesting on here, and I'm going to get you to explain it. It doesn't have a scavenger. It doesn't have like the pickup for oil in the crankcase. I'm going to get you in your words to explain how it's picked up and about that system, because that was something that was changed. People modified these and went back to the Austin A7, which is very similar to it.
Yeah. So basically, for the four conrods, you've got two small oil jets, and each time the crank goes past the oil jets, it picks it up in these Chinese eyes. They are basically on both sides, and then it's centrifugal forces that force the oil out to the conrods for lubrication. So there's no direct oil pressure.
So when this rotates, it comes in line with these jets. It's squirted into the eye.
Yes, it basically picks it up.
Yeah.
And then the centrifugal forces force the oil into the bearings. And the main bearings, I mean the roller bearings, is basically just the oil mist from the sump and the engine.
But there's also a little bit of lubrication done up the top because your breather runs into your carburetor.
Yes, so the crankcase breather basically goes with a tube straight up to carburetor, so the oil mist from the crankcase will be sucked up by the carburetor, and that is not enough lubrication for the inlet valves.
So we were talking earlier about the valves being external. By what you're saying, there's enough mist in that mixture, that air mix.
Yeah.
Would obviously be used in the engine anyway, but we have additional little bit of a oily mixture going through there. So it's cleverly done, isn't it? But it's so simple, the bottom end. It's, and the capacity of oil is, they've got the sump here.
Yeah, we've got a sump here that probably can hold 10-15 litres of oil, but it's only actually, the engine only have 2 litres that sit down in the very bottom, because if you overfill it, then the oil will go through, because there's no seal over to the clots. So you actually come out in the clutch housing, and then your clutch will start slipping. So you should never put more than 2 litres of oil. But this big aluminium sump, of course, works like one big oil cooler, so you never have problems with the oil getting too hot.
Bo, something that people quite like to see, we know we've got the kickstart that kicks the unconventional way to what people would imagine, but early BMWs like this, they kick on the side like this.
Yeah.
Now, the Kickstarter spring we can see here, they've got the ratchet gear will run directly onto the crankshaft, won't it?
Yes, directly onto the flywheel.
Yeah, so it's so simple. It is so simple, but that's it. There's nothing, and it just, when it comes out of mesh, it just drops down.
Yeah.
It's so simple there, isn't it?
And of course here you can see basically a cylinder head with the valves and the springs, and this is the cam housing laying on top. And in the front you have got the we'll call it the points, the ignition, and then you've got the coil and the distributor going on the front here. And when it's put together, you basically just move this here to adjust the ignition.
But there's a pipe feed and return inside here, isn't
Yeah,
it?
so that on the
Feeds
side of it,
the camshaft.
on the side of it here, you've got the oil pipe to go in and lubricate everything, and you've got the return.
Can we just see that if I lift that up, Bo?
Yeah, just take this off.
And if you look in here, you'll see the feed and return pipe.
And you can also see the weights for the advance on the ignition.
Just point to the feed and the return.
That's the feed, and the big hole here is the return.
Yep.
But the clever bit about this engine is that the bevel drive taken from the crankshaft, when it goes to the camshaft, it drives up through the dynamo, doesn't it?
Yes.
So something here we can show people here, can't we? We can show the bevel drive on the crank, and you explain it, Bo.
Yeah, so you've got basically the bevel drive here from the crank to the dynamo, and then you have got the bevel drive from the top of the dynamo that go into the bevel drive on the cam and drive the cam. So the dynamo basically have got the function of turning the cam shaft.
So, Bo, we've got here the basic frame. So this is probably off, what, say, 39 model?
The 39 model, this one,
So
yes.
all the pre-drillings are done. That's all done. So
Yep.
anything you want to fit, it's there. But this steel isn't just ordinary steel,
No,
is it?
it's high tensile steel made from Sweden, of course known for their strong steels.
And we've mentioned already that there's no welding.
And no welding on the old frames, everything
It's
is
all
riveted on.
riveted.
Yeah.
Now, if I just turn the frame up the right way, we notice up here we've got a cutaway. Now, this was originally for hand change,
Hand change, yes.
but you could, with an extra, you could have it modified.
Yeah, you can modify it to foot chains, or you could, when you bought them, you could basically choose from, I think it's from 30, the first models that came out with foot chains was the sport model, and then after that you could basically have it as an option when you bought your bike.
I think that's pretty cool. Here we've got battery tray, obviously,
Yeah.
but the head race bearings, they're quite big. And that's,
Quite big, yes.
Yeah, that's a cup and cone bearing,
Yeah.
isn't it? But that's, the size of that, you look at a lot of modern bikes, you're not going to have any failures at all there,
No,
are you?
no.
It's so well built. So, yeah, these will last. There's nothing really there that's going to really rust away, because it's such, this could be replicated quite easily, but it's 39, it's still as
Still
good
there,
as it
yes.
was.
But it's rather cold. So.
What are you doing there?
Just turn the emitter on and off.